And welcome. This is Wisdom Words chats with fabulous people on really important subjects for the time that we're in and the changes that we're all experiencing. So today I've invited Jessica Mannella. She's the proprietor and owner of FLWR Napa Valley, and she's here with us to say a few words on plants this morning. Hey, Jess.
Hi, Melissa. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. So I wanted to just give a little introduction of how I came to know Jess. I've known her for a really long time, so over 25 years now, over
Mhm.
30 years. And I first met her when she was working on Wall Street. So she had a very important position on Wall Street. And she'd come to me for a reading. And I noticed a few things about her. First off, that she was very smart. And second off that she had a high psychic nature, very empathetic nature, and a lot of psychic energy and abilities around her. And I wondered what she was going to be doing with them because I knew what she was currently in the process of was a step in her learning to open to her own gifts and be with them. So here we are 25 years later, and I see some of the fruits of her opening and her growth and her youth of these phenomenal talents with plants.
Hey,
So, Jess, tell us a little bit about plants and what you do with them and how you came to making these fabulous scents.
absolutely. Thank you so much. And first of all, thank you for that beautiful introduction and for the reflection that it offers me on my last 25 years and the journey that I've been on, both on my side, but also in step with you, which has been so joyful to be able to share. Um, you know, where I am today is that I am in the world a perfumer who perfumes with the natural materials, the essential oils, absolutes, and resins of the plants and flowers. A flower essence therapist who works with a vibrational piece of the flowers through flower essences, things like Bach remedies and flower essence society remedies, and a plant communicator, somebody who meditates with, talks with, and takes a lot of my support, strength, and guidance from the plant world. And it has been a long journey, although I will say that it's probably been in me my whole life. No, I'll say it has been in me my whole life. I can remember being 2 or 3 years old and going to the park with my mom and picking flowers for her and bringing her the flowers. And so, um, living my life in step with the plants is something I think I've done my whole life. And now I just dedicate my time to it. Um, you know, Scent is one way that we work with plants, and I think that that is a way that they communicate out into the world amongst themselves as well. Um, and then, of course, the vibrational piece, the flower essence piece, it's in the flower essences, but it's also in when you look at the plants. You can see, even in the color of a flower, uh, the energy that they're putting out that you are able to share with them. And so I suppose for me, you know, I like to spend my time thinking about how we can use this piece of this world that we're in to support ourselves. Does that answer your question?
I think so. It answers the question and it opens up a lot of possibilities for future talks. And one of them that I would love to, in the future, go deeper into is how we find out who we are and how we express that in the world through our careers or through our everyday values and, how we interact with one another.
That'd be
But
fun.
for now, we're focusing on the plants, the communication aspect that you spoke about, how I see plants communicating to the world, what's out of whack, how we could be more collaborative as human beings, how we could be less divisive. So we're currently seeing in the world, all these places where we're opposed to each other, we're in polarity, we're not in communication. And one of the things I notice from gardens and plants and flowers themselves is that they're collaborative, that they work together. You can walk into a huge field of flowers or a huge garden that's cultivated or just one that's just naturally there. And you kind of see all the interaction between these different plants, and none of them are competing to be a better one than the other in the sense of, how they look or, how much they can draw. Well, I suppose in nature there is an aspect of competition, but not the type or style of competition that we've moved into. And I think that the plants, the earth itself, the two-dimensional reality is pulling us, into um, listening and support. We talk about the earth as our mother, and
Yeah.
then all these plants are her children.
Yep.
And Kuan Yin, one of the main guides that I work with that communicates through us, especially on full moon channelings, has been speaking about the flowers for a long time
Wow.
and speaks about the garden that's opening in individuals' hearts. So
Yep.
the heart opening that's taking place on the planet and the aspects of the garden and the flowers in the garden. So she's taught us to focus on flower blessings, where we kind of open to the plants, and people have an experience of either seeing a plant or having a notion of a plant or thinking about it during this blessing time. And she says, work with your plant and see what the plant is saying to you. So the first flower that I had, and the first time we did flower blessings, and then many times later I had, was the peony.
Mm.
And the peony, I started to look up because she'd say, look it up, keep pictures of it around, find scents, find essences, find roots, find herbs. So there's these aspects of the flowers that you can use, the
Yep.
smell,
Yep.
which I definitely believe taking scent into the body definitely opens doorways, definitely communicates something. Then there's the image of them. The
Mhm.
beauty of flowers themselves is just breathtaking for me and uplifting, and it's just so opening in the art of them. And then there's also, so there's the smell, there's the look, then there's also their roots, their properties of their flowers themselves, the seeds, the roots, the leaves that
Yep.
is used for healing and herbal healing.
Hmm.
You are aware of all these, and I know you've studied different things, but you've moved towards the scent in your style of bringing it out into the world, and then the communication to build your sense. If you want to tell us a little bit more about that, that would be very exciting and illuminating.
Sure. So I'll start with this idea of the sense. I think for me, there are so many different aspects that are happening, right? We think about the way that our olfactory system works, where our scent is going to come in through the nose or through the mouth, and then it gets processed by the olfactory bulb, which runs along the back of the nose and the bottom of the brain, and then goes through one nerve, the cranial nerve, to the part of the brain that's responsible for making and storing memory and emotion. And for me, that very physical way the body works is the first clue for why physical scent is important, because it's a way that you can go directly to the brain, but more importantly, directly into who you are, right? Because I cannot know how you smell and you cannot know how I smell. It is such an internal experience, number one.
Mm.
And number two, the essential oils that are coming out of these plants, they're incredibly concentrated. So it's so much of that plant. For example, it takes 3 dozen roses to make 1 drop of rose absolute, right? And so you're getting all that potentiality of that rose coming in through your nose directly to the inside of you. That's the second piece. And then the other thing is that you have these deep memories or experiences, right? Because so much of how we smell is cultural and has to do with how we were raised or what we know now or what we might know from past lives, the things that we bring in genetically. And so you can go inward very fast with these
Mhm.
materials. And that's really important to me. The other thing is they bring you into your center. So they require you to be present with them, right? To experience them. And so it is such an instantaneous opportunity to just calm your nervous system and come into the center and be in that moment and be in connection with that material. Um, you know, that's the reason why scent was really important to me. But you asked also about this idea of how they communicate and what they communicate, and it's on so many different levels. But in the simplest level, with perfume, like with making a scent, um, sometimes I'll be making a scent or working with someone who's making a scent, and the plant will kind of do this like little pick me, pick me, pick me, right? And you can't even imagine why that should be there.
Yeah, I understand that.
Right, but you just get this idea, and it's the most perfect kind of union of a few things. And I really think that comes back to this idea of what you said about Mother Earth and plants being in community, right? So we can think about Suzanne Simard, who wrote the book Finding the Mother Tree, and all I'm sure we've heard about her research. But one of the things that she said in multiple interviews is that you can have a forest where there's a sapling and a lot of big trees, and those big trees, they are covering the sun coming in, and the bigger trees will push down through the root network nutrients to help that smaller tree grow. And so if you kind of lift up over that and you think about how the plant world is working in communication and connection with one another to ensure that everyone, even if they're different, can thrive. And then we can think about how these plants are here for us. When I talk about plant communication, it's almost like it's the way that a stronger, being that has things to offer, or, maybe they're stronger in a certain area, can push down that information and bring it to me in a place where I need it.
And I think there's so many pieces that you said in there that are just really rich, and we could kind of go off on different directions, but definitely that attitude of reaching down and giving and helping the weaker. It's such a different pattern than the money aspect. That success in the forest is the growth of the forest, and trees take so long to grow, and they're there. And instead of focusing on more of what they want individually, there's this whole picture, seeing the forest for the trees kind of thing. So
Exactly.
that's really powerful for
Yeah,
sure. And, this is what all the guides, and this is what this new age is all about, and this new earth we're in. It's about moving the collective to a greater awareness of compassion, of unconditional love and acceptance, and of support for everyone instead of just the getting ahead attitude that a lot of us were trained with, or, the direction that the world was going in this idea of more material, more stuff, more
yeah,
materialism for me, which is not looking at the bigger picture of how it's affecting someone else if I get more toilet paper or whatever it might be.
totally.
The other thing I wanted to point out is, 45 years ago, when I first woke up and the guide started speaking to me, one of the first things that, drove me to listening more is I had this fear that we were kind of going towards the wall and going to crash. And, that was very, caught up in the fear of it. The world's going to end tomorrow. And that was in the 1980s. And, Spirit told me, look, it's not going to be about a polar shift. It's going to be about a polarity shift, a shift from material to spiritual. And so there's a deep spirituality also in that connection with breathing in the scent that you spoke about, and I love the metaphor, or it's not a metaphor, the truth about how many roses it takes for one drop. But when you're breathing it in, you're breathing in all the roses and even past, present, and future. And so, that reminds me of I spoke to of the peony before, and Kuan Yin would say, research the flower that you get. So that part was up to us. The part of the communication is you get a light message, but you've got to go in there and dig a little. And I couldn't find right away an essential oil or a scent, but I started going to the herbal properties. And in Chinese medicine, it's very much for female healing, female organ healing. And that's exactly what I was needing to look at that point, 20 years ago or whenever it was that it first came. Now, back to the thing that you mentioned about the brain and the olfactory nerve and the bulb. That was super interesting because I recently had an experience with taste.
Yep.
So my initial awakening that started to come in the late 70s was I had an experience in the desert where I smelt a smell. I breathed in a smell. I'd never been to the desert before. I was in the Southwest, and I started having visions and feeling myself there, as a Native American in a past life. And I remember saying, I've been here before. And I remember a part of my brain going, what are you even talking about? And so
Yeah.
that was my first experience of deja vu
Mhm.
in the sense, or, one that was very impacting. Like you said, as a child, you remember this has been around for a while. And
Yeah.
I start to remember same thing, early experiences. So the experience I had the other night was super interesting. You live in Napa, I live in Sonoma, so we both, or the Napa area, we both live in the valley of California that has a lot of wine. So there's a
Mhm.
lot going on with wine. And I really never knew much about wine until I moved out here about 12 years ago or so. And, it's a wine culture. So it comes a lot. There's a whole, people talk about the smell and the bouquet, and they'll say there's, this, you know, dirt smell, and there's this, peach smell, and there's this, there's all these different terms they use. And, I've heard it a few times. I don't generally drink much alcohol, if any, I did drink a little bit more when I came here because I was trying the wines. But just the other night, I was at an art show, and the person I was with said they were pouring there at this gallery. The person said, "Oh, this is a really great winery. It's called Three Sticks, in Sonoma." And I was like, and she said, "You should try it." And I was like, "Well, I'll try a rosé because I've always liked rosé." And I said to the girl, "Just a little bit." I drank the wine, I tasted the wine, and I had an immediate vision, and I had an experience of just sort of standing on the land, feeling the dirt, feeling the vines, feeling the grape. And I was trying to talk to somebody. I understood what
Yeah.
some people were talking about from the inside out,
Yeah.
from the experience. So I'd had the experience with smell, but I never put it together with taste before until you said they're sort of the same nerve that they hit. So that's interesting.
Isn't it? And I will say that, they think that somewhere between 75 and 90% of your taste is retronasal, so up the back of your mouth into your olfactory bulb. So this is ortho, this is retro.
Mhm.
And so you're taking in so much that way as well. Although I have to tell you, when I hear you talking about that glass of wine, I think about, and I know Three Sticks, and it's really just a beautiful property. Um, the idea of what an artist who is creating something puts in to the
Hmm.
product, right? So you can think of the artist who created that rosé and how they were able to imbue all of that plant and work with that plant to
They
create
were
that
definitely
wine,
successful.
right? Isn't that cool? Not all wineries are like that, but just what a beautiful representation of what this person has created that you were able to experience in that glass of wine.
And I can say the same for what you make in your combinations, in your perfumes. There is an experience that you can have with them that's beyond just, oh, that's a nice smell. But it's like something that takes you into a space and you have an experience, and it can be a holy experience. It can be a spiritual experience. It can be an uplifting, happy memory experience. It can be something that takes you sort of deeper into your emotions and knowing. So I know from coming and smelling a lot of your scents that you have names for them like the ancients, like Rome, like that are about like I think it's green rose. Is
Yeah.
that right?
Yeah.
That you have tied into experiences, and you're, I don't know if I want to say hoping, but you're wanting to share that experience of the opening you had, not exactly of your specific, but realizing it can open doors for other people. And
Yeah.
like I said, the visions of the flowers that come in the blessings, as well as the scents that come from the plants, as well as the essences that we can
Yeah.
talk about a little later, they evoke experiences. They open doors. And so they can, strangely enough, open your third eye, or they can, take you even past the memory to something deeper. So You want to tell me about a little bit about some of your perfumes?
Sure, I'm happy to talk to you about that. I want to say that it's exactly where you went to, which is this idea of what doors can we open, and what doors can we open and bypass the mind, right? The kind of monkey mind, such that we can access so much more.
Yeah.
And how do we do that? And so, first of all, thank you for saying all those kind words. My perfumes, and I think many perfumes, when you're dealing with an artisan perfumer who's really trying to create something, particularly from the naturals, they are about a story, but they're also a doorway for others to create and go into their own story as well.
Yeah. I
So,
love that.
for example, the ancients is the scent of the divine feminine, and it physically represents the sense that someone like a Mary Magdalene or Mary the Mother or Kuan Yin would experience as they walked the earth in the places where they were. So, things like frankincense and myrrh, rose and labdanum. But it's also about the divine feminine within all of us, men and women. And when I created that scent, well, first I created it in concert with Mary Magdalene, with Mary the Mother, with Kuan Yin. And I went to them and said, help me to define a scent that really represents this. And I really felt guided when we put that together. Me and they. And when you smell it, right, my hope is that you can bypass into a place on what divine feminine within you means for you, right? What does it mean as you are accessing that for yourself? Because each of us as individuals, part of a bigger whole, but as individuals are going through the things that we need to go through to be able to access that. So that is the purpose in many of the scents that I create. And a lot of this I learned working with you, right? And I learned it as we were working with, and you were creating the wisdom sprays that I now am able to make for you. And it just seemed so obvious to me watching, learning, studying this with you, with others, that, you know, touch, taste, hearing, these are all these ways in, but just a simple scent can both access a memory, one that we know, or one that might come from a previous life or a deja vu, or some deep-seated thing you have genetically, but also can help to pave a memory going forward.
Mm.
So, of course, people know lavender and they've really connected lavender to relaxation. And I think the more you wire your brain to say, when I smell lavender, I feel relaxed, the more you can help, your brain to understand that. But also, you can create a scent or spray a scent and say, this scent has in it the materials that really will support me from a divine feminine standpoint, from a self love standpoint, a self compassion standpoint. And then you're also giving your body a tool to
Mhm.
access that as you need it.
So funny, I was just going to say a little bit before I was thinking about, I believe that the five scents are sort of the beginning of a layer of taking you deeper into a much broader perspective of how they work. So, taste, it was kind of fun to have that experience the other night and then to be able to tie it in with how they're tied in the system with the brain.
Yep.
But I was thinking as you were just going through them, like touch, people who have really refined energy fields that are able to touch another in a specific way. Some use Reiki, some use cranial sacral. They open up. I've been on the table with a cranial sacral therapist and opened up to a past life, many times, or
Yes.
to places where there's something stuck in the body, and I'll have a vision of what happened to that part of the body at the time in this lifetime that stopped something up. So it's definitely this recognition and even thinking about I've been working a lot with meditation, and meditation is so highly recommended by, doctors, by therapists, by everybody these days, advertising wellness and simplicity and go meditate. And I just think that half the people really understand what meditate is about. It's an experience that you have to have, just like when you start to breathe in these scents and they open one door and one layer and a deeper and deeper layer. So,
Yes.
in training of the stages of meditation, the first one is just calming that monkey mind, like some of the scents can do. And they set you up to have an experience of opening the next door or going through the next layer, just like, an onion peel. So that's really cool. And then there was one other point that you made that really kind of hit me, which I forgot, but I'm sure it'll come back. Well, let's go into the wisdom sprays. So, just said something earlier about when she's making a spray for someone or a perfume for someone, an individualized one when someone's having a specific, issue that you can help by making up this combination perfume for, or this combination floral essence, which we'll talk about in a little bit too. And was receiving from Kuan Yin. She gave me the gift. She said the gift that she was bringing to humanity, and this is about 40 years ago or something, she first told me, is the garden. And we're opening the garden in the heart, she spoke of. And I was like, okay, I understand the metaphor of the garden, and I'll listen to this. And then she began to bring in this idea of utilizing things. So you get an idea, like you said, and it's not where you thought necessarily in your mind you were going. It's experience that comes through in a different way. So she invited me to make up these sprays, and I have formulas from many of the masters, from Kuan Yin, from Archangel Michael, from Saint Germain, and they added in essences, essential oils, gem elixirs in some points, and different energy elixirs. So I began to get more involved with the world of essences through Pearlandra, through flower essence, through Bach, through Pegasus, some really interesting vibrational people who listen to the vibrations and create these essences. So the formulas would come up and I would just be making them and loving them and loving how they affected me and sharing them with people and finding that people would say they affected them. As I went on doing it for about 10 years, it's not my main thing and I didn't have the time to do it. And then I was taking a look at what Jess was evolving into and I was like, oh, I'm just going to hand over the formulas because I know that you're doing them from the very most pristine way of handling energies and even researching which essential oil companies, which glass, which bottles, which everything would be the best and the most effective, but also the most environmentally friendly and kind to the plants and the animals. So I appreciate that. And go ahead and let us know what you might have experienced working with these. And I know you're also making some essences from even your perfumes, like you said, came from Mother Mary, Kuan Yin, Mary Magdalene.
Yeah. So I think that on that note, what I find is any of the materials that get made with the naturals, you really have, I find you have to be willing to be in partnership with nature in it.
Yes.
It's essential. But
And
uh,
I'll just say the same thing with God, with spirit. You have to be willing to be in partnership with spirit. And sometimes the idea you get when an idea first comes in, your mind grabs it
yeah,
and takes you into a direction, and spirit says, no, 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 no. Or the flowers say, no, 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 no. Like you
totally.
said, pick me, go over here.
Yeah, and I'm going to come back to your question because it's really an important one. But isn't it interesting how, I mean, at least for me, how often my mind is like, we need to do this. But
Oh,
when I ask the flowers, they show me something entirely different. And then all of a sudden, I have an unlock for what's actually happening.
and even a breakdown or a breakup before the breakthrough happens. And I think, whether it's spiritual that opens you, or the smell of the scents, or the touch of a healer, or just a bang on the head, in your reality, there is that need to go into the deeper experience that goes beyond the mind.
Yeah. And it's so interesting listening to you talk about Kuan Yin and about the Kuan Yin um, formula coming in and about the garden. this is the first time, which seems crazy, right? Once again, it's like getting these little moments that come in. I began building my garden in the mind probably 20 years ago, right? Under your guidance, might have been longer. And I won't go too much into it right now. It's just a really powerful tool that I've had in my life where it's a place that I can go that is internal and external for support, right? And the flowers, the physical 3D flowers will actually play into it, right? I'll watch what's coming up and they'll show up in my garden. But that to me is so important because Kuan Yin's garden within me has been such an important part of my stability in this world, an ability to stay rooted no matter what's happening, in center no matter what's happening. And so the spray, Kuan Yin's garden, is truly that. You know, it's 5 different flowers and they're all so different, right? So if you were thinking about a perfume, you wouldn't necessarily put these all together. Jasmine and rose and ylang and lavender and neroli. Um, because you lean on one or the other. But together they create this bouquet or this sense of the garden that what I have found when people use it, and I'd be curious to see what you hear, is I hear people tell me, you know, they're dousing themselves in it. It's like this protective balm. I don't want to call it a shell, it's a balm that comes in, and that's how I think about my garden. Right? My
Mhm.
garden, my internal garden is a place that I can go to plug into the new healed whole Mother Earth, to plug into the support that is always there for all of us. And the spray is one of the physical representations of that.
Yes, and a representation that you can feel and infuse and draw into yourself. I want to go back to what you said about the balm or the dowsing in it. So it's interesting to me. I have some people that say, "Oh, this smells good," and you know they have it for a year, whereas I'm going through this like your clients that I have. You know, every couple of months I have to have
Your
another one
baths
because
in
I've
them,
used it
totally.
up. You
Yeah.
know. But so that always surprises me when somebody tells me like, oh, they use it, very infrequently because to me it's part of the practice. So anyone that works with me or knows that I'm always going to be kind of maybe harping a little bit on practice and how we need to take those tools and utilize them and then practice utilize them. You get better the more you immerse yourself into learning about the perfumes and the flowers and the this and the that. But what's happening is that each one of us has a field, an energy field. Or in quantum reality, we've got this energy field that's electromagnetic, and we've also got this mind, and we've also got this body, and those are not permanent. They are going to go away, just like the rose in the garden will only last, she blooms maybe 4 or 5 days, and then she's shedding her petals and letting the center seeds fall into the earth and wilting and browning and so on and so forth. So it's a process, it's a journey, it's something that happens in the moment, and the field is always changing.
Oh, I love that.
The physical reality is always changing, and I think one of the greatest messages that the plants give us is that it's a cycle, kiddos. We're going to be beautiful, but don't try to dry us into beauty. I mean, I think they're doing an amazing job with silk flowers these days, and I have a few of them in my house, but there's just nothing like the real thing. There's nothing like the beauty of it. I want to go back to the field. So the collective field is changing because the new healed whole Mother Earth herself is evolving. And so the human field has to evolve. So the more individuals that evolve their field and bring things into their field that are going to, you said, stabilize you. The garden idea, just building it in your mind was stabilizing it, and then building it in the reality with sense was stabilizing. Then, communicating with them. You said, I'm also a flower communicator. I listen to them and the messages that they're giving to me. So this sort of multi-dimensional reality has really become part of your daily life and operation and ability to sort of find that center place and draw on all these different parts to help you navigate this shifting time that we're in, and to like not only just navigate it, but to welcome it. I never saw a rose in the garden crying because she lost her petals.
Yeah.
I never saw one. I even think of the Bible, they speak to the flowers, consider the lilies of the field. They
Yeah.
don't sit there and complain about or ask for this or that. They just are, and they're most beautifully attired, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. As you were talking, it made me just think about what's that song? To everything turn, turn, turn. The one like there's a time and a reason and a season for everything.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The birds. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that that's one of the things that the flowers have the ability to show us.
Hmm.
And I have so many things to say. So let me just start with that, and then I'll say another thing.
Okay.
Um, they have an ability to show us that we can fully express in this moment where we are right now,
Yeah.
and that's it's okay for that not to be the same thing tomorrow.
Yes.
And if we can sit in that and be accepting of self in that, we will wind up being incredibly beautiful to ourselves and to the world. Like we just are fully ourselves. And so I love when I go for a walk in the morning and I look at the flowers and I stick my nose in every rose bush and I touch them and say good morning to them. But it's really this idea of fully understanding that the full expression of who we are, who they are, who we all are, is the very best thing we can do in our world. That's the first thing. The second thing that really comes up
I
for
agree with that.
me. Hmm?
I said, I agree with that.
Yeah, yeah. And then I think the other thing that comes up for me as I think about this is, and when we are in this world, when the world is moving the way that it is, when the energy is so bumpy, that sometimes being able to hook into or communicate with the things that do know themselves as they are in every moment
Yeah.
can like offer us either a reflection or a comfort, right?
Hmm. I agree.
When we're struggling. I remember we had some really bad rains here in Northern California in like January, February, and I had daffodils out already. And I remember going outside and irises, tons of them, and like thinking, oh, I better cut these because these horrible rains are going to like, make them go away. And so I went and cut some of the flowers. But when I went back out, like many of the irises that I didn't cut were still fine.
Mhm.
They knew who they were. They're grounded and they stayed grounded even in the rain and the wind and all of that. Um, and so I think it's a really interesting reflection for us. And then the final thing I want to say, because I think it's something that's really only come to me now, and I've been studying with youth, learning, understanding this for so long. And that is that these tools, these supports are available to all of us all of the time. And like my mind gets a little bit blown by that, right? I have this whole idea, oh, somehow I don't deserve to have the support all the time. I can walk out the door and go look at those flowers and have it. Sort of like get over yourself. Just know that it's there for you.
That's a really great point because that's the mind interfering again with some idea it has from the past through some experience or somebody telling you something or something you picked up from social world or whatever. And then the other thing I think that available all the time, the tools are available all the time. And I find I have to remind myself to take a moment and meditate, getting to today's 11 p.m. Sorry, 11 a.m. meditation for 15 minutes. It's like, I started to like make myself, oh, I've got to do this before. And then I was like, okay, I started at 11:04 and just did my 15 meditation and it was just really wonderful. So they are there all the time, but we have to make that choice to actually use the tool. The tools are there, the plants are there, and to use them in the way that is the most beneficial for all.
Yes. Yeah. Can I just want to say one thing? And what made me think about this really ultimately, originally was when you talked about how you use your sprays all the time. And then
Mhm.
you see other people who use them sparingly. And it was just this idea of why. there's no need to have scarcity in the support for yourself, right?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Like you deserve to support yourself and to support like that whole thing. It's part of why we're here. It's part of community. It's how I feel. It's how we can get into harmony together. And then one plus one never equals two.
No. It's true. And I think the other thing too is that everything, the perfume, the scents that we're talking about, the meditation, the going, for a walk, the taking a break and meditating for 15 minutes, whatever it is, the mindfulness, these tools, kind of help you understand how a mind or a thought can take over and start to pull you. In Buddhism, they call them pull you into the five poisons, how these root things of attaching to an idea. I want it to stay this way.
Yeah.
I see this beautiful daffodil and I don't want the rain to smush it.
Yes, yes, exactly. Instead of
Yeah.
letting the beautiful daffodil live its life.
And yeah, live its life and have its experience and go on to keep, looping and recreating. And that's one thing that I think we forget about. Anyway, I did want to just take a few more minutes. This has really been wonderful, and you're, just such an encyclopedia of flower knowledge. And I think there's a lot of things that we can go forward and talk about, and we're definitely planning on doing that. So I'll look forward to our next conversation.
Me
But I
too.
did want to just real quick about the essence being different from
Oh, yeah.
the essential oil, if you want to just give us a little
I
um,
will. That's such a great question. And it's a hard
knowledge.
one for people, right? Because there's the word essential oil and then there's the word flower essence.
Right.
So, flower essences are the vibrational expression of the flowers. They are extracted with practitioners who will work with the flowers and pick them in their native space and at the peak of their bloom. And they will then put them into a spring water, a crystal bowl, and they will allow those flowers to infuse into this mother water, which is then put into brandy. Um, and the way that I like to think about it, I hope I have this right, herbalists would tell me, but there are so many ways that the flowers are able to give to us, right? There's the physical flowers on the earth and what they do, what they look like, there's their scent, then there's the herbal decoctions that you get from the dried herbal pieces, then there's flower essences. There are many other ways, but let's just kind of use that as a continuum. The herbal decoctions, they're very 3D and they are very strong. I mean, many medicines actually come from this and they work
Absolutely.
very much on the 3D physical body. Flower essences are much more vibrational. So they'll
Mhm.
work not, they can impact the body, but really they're working on the emotional body, the psychic body for those that kind of think about that, the spiritual body. And what flower essences do is they don't actually fix things or change things so much as they allow you, they work in partnership with you to allow that to happen. It's the very best way I can describe it. So, an example would be that, you might be taking a flower essence because you're feeling very overwhelmed, right? A perfect one, which comes from Bach Remedies, is elm for overwhelm, so easy to remember.
Mhm.
Um, the elm isn't going to come in and be your assistant. It's not like walking in the door and saying, like, what emails can I send for you?
Right.
Instead, the elm is allowing you to sit in that overwhelm and stay rooted and grounded. And in that, then you can see how to organize what you need to do in your life, perhaps how to find support. It's like a small way to do it, to explain it.
Yeah, and I think what you mentioned about the vibrational part, this may be really familiar to some people, it may be new to others, but things like sound baths and working with the tones and the chakras, energy centers in the body, and the flower essences, they go right to the field. So, they go right into that energy field that we talked about. They're kind of direct connection there. And so they're adding that support to the field, and again, you kind of have to go inward to pull that in. Whereas if you're taking it in your body, like through an herb or something, it's got to go through the physical layers and go out into the field. So we're always, affecting the field. But I think the thing about the essences is they go directly to the subtle bodies. And so sometimes it's a little challenging for people to connect with the idea that something could affect their subtle body and that could change their physical. They're just very, very stuck on the idea that, for example, during COVID, when we weren't allowed to go out into the physical world anymore, I was really missing my acupuncturist, and I was meditating one day and probably lamenting a little bit about not being able to go see the acupuncturist. And I heard, oh, call her and ask her to do acupuncture over the phone. I was like, oh, great idea. So I called her up and I asked her, do you do distance acupuncture? And she said, yes. And she told me later that she'd never done it before, but in that moment she heard a yes.
Yeah.
And I had my first experience was amazing. And since then, I've sent her many, many people, and one or two or three that, the greater percent really felt it. You've worked with it that way, I
Yep.
think, and had real experiences with it. But there was always a percentage that would say to me, they would just be stuck on how can you put a pin through to me over the phone? How can you touch me? Because she was connecting field to field, and
Yes.
the field was then expressing itself into the physical,
Yeah.
first of all, into the emotional, I think, which is what one of the things scent does, is it goes into that emotional body and it's uplifting.
Yep.
People would feel better or feel something, or a door would open and they'd have a vision. So I do believe that ultimately that's what every plant, every stone, every element on the earth does speak to us, because our bodies, our physical bodies, are made up of all those elements,
Yeah, it
And so
makes a
they're
lot of sense.
speaking to the elements within. And one of the things that we all know and the earth is showing us is that we've brought it out of whack by using certain minerals or nutrients. Like take gold, we just rape the earth of all the gold because we decided that gold is a fabulous thing. And we don't even realize how the mineral of gold interacts with everything else and needs to be there interacting, not, chunked out of the earth and stuck all over us. Not that I'm not wearing some of myself. But I think that's one of the things that I've been thinking about lately. We know that change is coming. We've asked for change. We want this earth to change. And yet there's always the part that resists the change in the human nature that's trying to solidify and hold on to something and not let that flow you were talking about before happen.
Yeah, it makes me think about, and I kind of want to connect it back to flower essences, what you've talked about a lot in talks before that I've seen about how we get into a push pull because we think that that's a way that we can change things. And that part of what we have to do is learn to stop the push pull, because that's where the transformation can happen. It can happen instantaneously, right? We stop getting into either a resistance or wanting it to be a certain way, whatever that is. I think
So funny, you said something about the scent before brings you to being present, being present. And yes, that's what I've learned from some of the masters like Saint Germain. Being fully present in the moment is where you affect the past and the future. And you need to have that. So if we're clinging on to something, or we're worried about the past, or we're worried about the future, we cannot do anything but keep bringing the same experience forward. So this is an opportunity to stop, be still, go inward, and find a way to be fully present in the moment with whatever is real. You know,
yes, and this is what I think the flowers are doing. Like as I'm listening to you and I'm thinking about them and thinking about the flower essences, thinking about the scents, the flower essences, right? Just using that push pull idea, it can stop it, right? Stop that push pull.
yeah,
And it doesn't mean you don't still have that other side of it there, but now you can sit with it, and now all of a sudden you're not in that fight anymore. It starts to shift,
yeah. You're in
right?
the middle way, you're in the center, and you can discern, which
Yes.
is, a higher frequency of a judgment of this is right, this is wrong, this is that, whatever.
Yeah, and I bring it back to where we started, although we don't need to go down this path right now, but you talked a little bit about like how we've kind of backed ourselves into a corner as a world,
Mhm.
right? Because we got very fixated on, you know, treasure And so now we have to get out of that. We're getting out of that. We don't have a choice, right? It's happening. Um, and I think that some of what we have to do is learn how to be able to be in either these push pulls or these like big energetic or emotional things. And part of it isn't fighting it, right? Part of it isn't like being in that little corner with all your treasure going like this, because it's not going to work.
Well, like Pema Chodron always says, be curious. So you come to life not saying it's good or it's bad. You come to life saying, okay, this is a moment. This thing happened. What can I learn about it? And just kind of sitting with it with a curiosity rather than, oh, this is going to be a bad day. This is going to be a good day.
Yeah, and your flowers, those are your curiosity companions, whether it's in scent, you can be curious about the scent, and the flower essences that give you the strength to be curious, the gem elixirs, all of them.
Or even just looking at the buds and wondering, what color is it going to be?
Yeah, or there's this like very spiky but very pretty purple and green flower that yesterday when I walked was open, and then I was walking today and it had closed, and I was just spending all this time thinking about what was that flower, not thinking, but what was what was its purpose of opening and closing, and thinking about like working with the sun.
Yeah. And it was kind of interesting. I was talking about the three stages of meditation, and it's been thinking about that a lot lately and studying meditation and trying to see if I could find ways to help people sink into meditation more, enjoy it more, not be frustrated during it as I was when I first tried to start many, many years ago. And one of the people I'm working with, Josh, who puts the things up on YouTube for us, he'll be putting this up. He showed me a picture that he was playing with, and it was three pictures of the lotus, the coming up with the bud and then the starting to open and then the full opening. And I thought, oh, I want to save that. He was going to use it for the Four Noble Truths. And I was like, oh, I want to save that for the three stages of meditation,
Oh, beautiful. I love that. Yeah,
yeah,
really, really
yeah,
nice.
because there is a bit of a like, before you really open to those other doorways and have those experiences, there is the experience of your own mind and what's going on in it and what you call the monkey mind. Um,
Also, lotus is such a wonderful kind of essence for helping to access that higher self in a way that is balanced.
yeah, and so, probably that's why you see lotus so many times, lotus, all these different all around meditation, around Buddhist things and so on and so forth. But the other thing that's really interesting is they have a very short life. You
Hmm.
know,
Hmm.
they just last what, couple days,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
you see each stage, and then it's in the next stage, and the next stage, and then it's in the final stage where it's dissolving and going back into the field again to bring, more support, more energy, more new life.
That's
So,
right. From the mud.
yeah, wonderful way to probably end our talk on flowers today.
Oh, thank you. I always
Yeah.
love talking to you about flowers. I love talking about flowers, but I love talking to you about flowers. And isn't it so joyous to be able to, in curiosity, at least for me, start to discover
Yeah.
things I
More.
hadn't thought about with things that have been in my life. And Kuan Yin spray has been in my life for such a long time, my garden, and I never even just, it's another dimension.
Yeah, and it happens every day. There's more and more and more that you can learn when you turn off the brain's desire to say, this is how it is.
Mhm.
That's really cool. All right, let's go ahead and say goodbye for the moment, and then we'll join each other again soon with some more interesting chats. And
Yes.
thank you, everyone, for listening.
Thank you.
Blessings.
Awesome. Take care.